All right, welcome everybody to Animal Assisted Activities and Animal Assisted Therapy, structuring visits for recreation therapy programs. I'm Jeff Schwartz, I'm the moderator. I have your CEU forms. If anyone didn't give me one, please do. And turn your cell phones down or off, please. And without further ado, Kristen Russell Miller.
Hi. I'm hoping this audio thing goes away. Oh, look at that. There we go. All right.
We can hear you well, Kristen, too. I just want you to know.
And you all saw my doggy slide already. So this is my About Me slide. I am like the only one here, I guess, that went to Green Mountain College in Vermont for recreation therapy. I got my bachelor's degree there and did my internship at Community General Hospital in Syracuse, New York, and then tripped and fell into a job at Hutchings Psychiatric Center, and I've been there for 21 years. So my CTRS career was my first career. And since that time, so I've been a CTRS for, I'm coming up on 20 years in June. And about 18 years ago, I fell in love with this dog. He's not in this slide. We'll get to see him a little later. Well, I met a guy, right? And the guy had a dog. And then I fell in love with the dog. There's my kids now, though. So I took a therapy dog class with the dog that I fell in love with. And I met a friend. And I followed her around. And after that, I became a certified professional dog trainer. So I'm a CTRS. I'm also a certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed. I am an AKC CGC evaluator, so I do canine citizen tests, trick tests, stuff like that. And I'm also a fear-free elite certified trainer. So I've been with the fear-free program since it really started a few years ago. If you're interested in learning more about fear-free stuff, animal welfare is super important to me, just like the welfare of the people that you care for. You can learn more at fearfreehappyhomes.com. All right, so those are my certifications. My professional memberships include NYSTRA. I've grown up with NYSTRA, and I know many of you. Some of you, I don't think anyone's been in this presentation before. I did a similar presentation around 10 years ago now. The International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants. I'm a supporting member. I'm not a certified member yet because I'm a full-time administrator at Hutchings and a part-time dog trainer. I am also a member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers, a professional member, and again, the Fear Free program and also their shelter program. These are my children. Delilah is the little brown kitty. She lives with my ex-husband. Artie is the black dog. He doesn't like strangers, so that's where he wears that cool bandana. My cats are Mel. She's an Egyptian mouse. Someone paid $1,000 for her and decided they didn't want her anymore. And then this is Tommy. I decided to foster cats, and Tommy came with her 2 children, Lucy and Farley, and they never left. So we ended up with from 1 cat to 4. And then that is my daughter and my heart dog Higgins, and they're pretty famous. They're actually in the Syracuse Family Times. We did an article on dog training. So this subject is very near and dear to my heart. It is something I'm super passionate about on both sides of my career. And I think that there's some things that are really important for recreation therapists to be aware of when they're thinking about having animals come into their facilities, both for the humans that you're caring for and the animals that you're going to have coming in. And then lots of considerations as far as what risk management wise you need to be aware of, data wise, so that you can show that these programs have efficacy and that they're working well for you. So the first thing we're going to do is do some definitions and talk about what the different programs are. First up is animal assisted activities. So animal assisted activities are things that you are probably doing already, and then you have animals and they come in and join activities really that you have planned already, or they are traditional kind of pet therapy visits where you partner with an organization, hopefully, and the animals come into your facility. And it's not necessarily goal directed, it's more for socialization, so that the people that you're caring for get to have an opportunity to interact with animals. Next up is animal assisted therapy. This is very pointedly goal directed, very intervention specific activities that involve animals. So working with the animal is actually part of the modality as opposed to just like them coming to visit. Also, animal assisted education is planned and structured interventions that have related service and specific academic or educational goals. So for me, animal assisted education would include reading programs where kids go to the library to read to a dog, or sometimes speech will use dogs in conjunction with some of their education goals when they're in a school environment. And finally, resident animals. Those are animals that live in a facility full time. We're not going to talk as much about this today, but we will be talking about welfare for the animals that we have in our facilities or that are visiting our facilities. I think that some animals living in facilities is wonderful. Fish, birds, animals that can live in containment like that, but I have different feelings about dogs living in facilities. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So first, when you're thinking about where you work and who you serve, what is right for your program? So the things that you want to look at are who you're serving, right? Like what population are you working with? What's their age? Do they have cultural values related to animals? What are their strengths? What are their challenges? Do they have challenging behaviors that are going to be difficult for an animal to be around? Or that will make it difficult for them to interact with. When I think about my experience working in kids inpatient mental health services, for example, we have to really consider like who's doing what that day, even when we have animals coming into the program. How many people are you going to be serving? There is prescribed ratios when we're looking at, for example, most of my experience and what we're going to be talking about today is a dog coming into a facility or a cat coming into a facility. I've actually worked with horses as well. But how many consumers are you looking at? So it's important to make sure that you have enough animals to serve all of the people that want to be seen. One thing that we see a lot is that we spread ourselves too thin with a number of pets that are coming into a program, and then not everybody is able to access the service, or the dogs welfare becomes a concern because they are exhausted from serving each person as they go along. Also, what kind of time frames are you looking for? Do you have daytime visits? How many hours do you anticipate the animal being available to be interacted with? And then, you know, who's coming, what their scheduling availability is versus your staff availability. And finally, what are you looking for? What do you want to have happen as a result of the animal interactions in whatever form that you're choosing from the 4 services that we talked about? What are you hoping outcomes would be? So what are some possible outcomes for animal assisted activities? That is just having an animal come into the facility, not necessarily go directly. Feedback, yeah, sure. People get tactile stimulation of dogs. Anybody else? Maybe do any pet therapy visits or anything like that in our facilities? Okay. Okay. And so he lives with you at your home. What are some of the outcomes that you see when he lives with you? He's very popular.
Yeah, she's very popular.
Yes, the humans disappear when the dogs. Get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk definitely more about that. So animal assisted activities, they can enhance people's quality of life. Sometimes there are specific goals that we look for, like some people need that sensory stimulation or that touch to help improve memory. It certainly improves motivation, and this is one that I like to talk about because I'm more motivated to go to work on the days the dogs are coming. And you know, my clients, I see their motivation change when they know that there's an animal involved in the activity. If you've ever been in one of the programs or had one of the programs like the zoo comes to visit, or anytime there are certain people, right, who aren't going to participate in these things. So those folks you will not see more motivation in, but many people, their motivation really is improved just by even talking about animals sometimes. It allows for socialization and reminiscing, right? A lot of folks, especially when we start to work with anybody over 18, they start to tell you about their pets and what their life is like. Actually, kids are pretty similar. I have this at home. We used to have one of these. My dog did this, you know, so you have like just a foot in the door for interaction with the people that you're working with as well. So how about some differences and outcomes that we're looking for when we talk about more goal-directed or therapy specific interactions? Any ideas before I pull up? Sure. Yeah, so gross motor involvement and fine motor involvement, and sometimes we use grooming as a modality to improve those things. Emotional regulation, sure. People actually learn to, a lot of us know that how we act around an animal can affect how they act, right? So we actually learn to get ourselves together in order to have those interactions. Anything else? Yes, improve speech. Yep. Yeah, triggers whatever part of their memory is able to bring up the words that they weren't able to use before. Sure. Sometimes in mental health, that's, you know, my main bag, I guess, is we look for animals as a social lubricant, if you will. It decreases isolation, encourage people to come out of their room. So when we're looking at therapy specific interventions, I do believe that social facilitation and decreased isolation are very specific goals. Decreasing depression, improving attention, improving emotional regulation. A lot of people look to animals to assist them with coping. We see tons and tons of service dogs in the world with veterans, for example, right? To help them, the dogs will do specific tasks to assist the person in managing their emotions. And we can do things like improve someone's sequencing skills or other specific tasks. Maybe there is something that they'd like to do related to their recreation and leisure in their past life, but they're unable to do that now. And there might be something that we can do with an animal to help them, you know, improve that skill so they're actually able to participate in it more fully later on. These are the organizations that I'm the most familiar with from my work in therapy services, but there is an entire list of national and local therapy organizations on the AKC's website. The AKC is actually recognizing therapy dog work as a title now. So if you have a dog that's registered with the AKC, you can get an agility title. You can get a rally title, you can get all these dog sports titles, and they consider therapy work a dog sport. So they're able to title dogs who have, I think it's like 50 or 100 hours in providing therapy services through one of the organizations that they recognize. They have to have a documentation to prove that your dog has done that. Most of my time was with Paws of CNY, but I also have interactions with pet partners. And then I have used Therapy Dogs International a lot to help me with some research because they're such a large organization. They literally are an international organization. So they have more access to some data and what different agencies are doing in different areas and parts of the world and our country. But I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my history with Paws. So I had my dog Gordon. I wanted him to become a therapy dog. He just loved people and he didn't care how much they touched them. And he would go, he was like the super social guy at every party. He's like the me of the dog world. And he would just go say hi to everyone. And I'm like, this dog and I need to do the stuff. So we became members of an organization called Sunshine Friends Incorporated, which later became Paws of CNY. So my first foray into doing dog training was actually teaching therapy dog classes and teaching people what their dogs could do as a part of their therapy work, which was super helpful as a CTRS, right? I had a really good idea of what kind of outcomes I was looking for, what I was hopeful for dogs to be able to do. So my first foray into dog training was with Paws and therapy work. I eventually joined their board, taught all of their therapy dog classes, and that has evolved for me into something very different now. I no longer am on their board. I am just a dog trainer now, and I no longer teach therapy dog classes. I'm familiar with the expectations. I do individual training sometimes related to that, but I don't do that work anymore. Pet Partners is a similar organization. Pet Partners is a national organization, so there's chapters usually in certain areas, like Syracuse. I'm from Central New York. Syracuse has a Pet Partners chapter, so surrounding counties around Onondaga County, people join Pet Partners. The organizations look a little bit different in the way that they practice. So TDI and Pet Partners, you join their organization, you take a test with your dog, you are considered a approved team, and then you find the facilities to visit at and facilitate those visits kind of on your own. You schedule yourself, you can go and find a new place and recruit a new location to go visit. Paws of CNY is much more oversight. They partner with the organization and then they assign teams to the facilities based on need. All of Paws new teams, their therapy teams, will do long-term care assisted living visits first because that's the largest cohort of people they serve, and it's also the most safe environment that they have for dogs to begin visits so that they can actually do live tests. So they get half certified by taking a test with an evaluator, and then the rest of their certification is 3 monthly visits, 1 visit a month for 3 months in the same facility with familiar people. And we evaluate how the dog is doing in that environment. Most of the testing, both for Paws of CNY and Pet Partners, is really less about the person and their handling and more about the dog's temperament, how sturdy they are in managing different, the way people walk differently, the ways that they're being touched, what their tolerance is for visiting. You were talking about how an hour is time for a break. Some dogs start with fuses really long, and I've actually seen the opposite end where a dog looked like they were happy to go to work. They got their vest on, they got in the car, they got out of the car at the facility, and the dog put the brakes on and said, I can't get in there anymore. I tend to Paws model a little bit better, just for my personal preference, being on the dog welfare side of things, because they have time limits, they have visit limits. So you can visit for up to 2 hours once a week. That is all you can do with your dog through Paws. And depending on the environment, they may limit it even further, but for in general, that is what they would max you out at. So you would be looking at about 8 hours a month total to volunteer with your dog, which I think again is really important. The problem sometimes is that the people who handle the dogs, their owners or their companion, sometimes it'll be different people in the household. We love this work too, right? So I loved working with Gordon and taking him places. We visited a maternity ward at the hospital where there were mothers on bed rest. We visited the hematology oncology ward at one of our local hospitals. We did reading programs. But looking back now, I see that Gordon started to age out. And I initially didn't notice, so we stopped doing hospital visits and started just doing reading programs because I wasn't ready to let go. But Gordon was like, I'm old. I want to stay home. So eventually my friends buffered all of those emotions for me, and we threw a retirement party for my dog. He taught me so much. But I really firmly believe that we need to maintain the animal's quality of life. I went to the boundaries presentation earlier, and one of the things that Jackie brought up was like that power dynamic when there's a therapist and a client and there's a relationship, right? And the same thing happens with our dogs and cats, also visit, of horses. And it's just vitally important that the people who work in the facility know what to look for stress in animals, and that the handlers know what to look for stress in animals. And even when they do, they miss stuff, which is why it's important that you all know a little bit about body language and what kinds of things are helpful or important for animals, because somebody needs to check us owners out there, because we love your clients as much as you do, and we love to see them brighten up when they interact with our animals. And sometimes we miss those really like stressful events for our animals, which puts everyone in danger. And can ruin your program and ruin the quality of your program. So it's really important to monitor that. All right, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds. So things that once you have chosen what kind of program you want, animal-assisted therapy versus animal-assisted activities versus education versus a resident dog, these are the considerations that you want to take into when you're looking at an organization to partner with. Even with resident dogs, there are programs that help create dogs, right? That can handle that kind of environment. But mainly what I'm talking about is dogs who show up to visit for animal-assisted activities or animal-assisted therapy and do not live in your facility. You want to consider where they are, right? So we talked a little bit about TDI versus Pet Partners versus PAWS. I love PAWS. It's a fabulous organization. They only visit in Onondaga and Oswego County and New York. So you're not gonna be able to find that service in your area. You're gonna need to look around and see where they are, where their volunteers are. It's important to understand like where the volunteers travel from if they're coming to your facility, because you may have considerations for weather, right? Or for other reasons that they're unable to get to you at times. So you just wanna have awareness of not only where the organization is located so that you have good communication with them, but also where their volunteers come from. Types of animals. What does your facility accept or allow? Most pet therapy organizations work with dogs. They're the most portable, right? And they are the most consistent temperament-wise. So we're actually able to do tests, and we know that through lots of studies that dogs are able to present fairly consistently depending on what their environment like. If they're pretty sound, when animals are anxious, they tend to present differently in different environments. So that's why tests usually are more than a one-off thing when you look at different environments. Cats, at PAWS, we had 3 therapy cats in our program of 150 dogs and 3 cats, because cats generally don't travel well. And that's because a cat's socialization period is the first 7 weeks of their life. And how many of you get kittens and take them for car rides in the first 7 weeks of your life? You probably don't. My brother-in-law did, and he has a cat that goes everywhere with him. He took him to the park on purpose to take him for walks on a leash. Like, that cat doesn't care about that. But most cats change their environment and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't function, and they just shut right down. So a lot of cats, even though they would be fabulous animals to work with in a facility, don't travel well. They also don't potty in the same manner as a dog, right? You can air a dog outside before you go in the facility. That's going to be a more difficult interaction with the cat. Cats tend to be more often facility animals and be resident animals at a facility because they're pretty easy to maintain if you keep them around. I have also done pet therapy visits, animal assisted therapy visits with horses, and I have also done animal assisted activities visits with horses. I had a team of miniature horses that we would take to different places, and depending on what they needed, they got different things. There was one miniature horse that went to SUNY or upstate in Syracuse, and she had sneakers that she wore into the facility because they were concerned about her feet on the floor. So the owner had actually taught the horse to wear horse sneakers, kind of like a Build-A-Bear, but it was for a real horse. She was fabulous, and she really did very pointed interventions in their physical medicine and rehab department. And then we also had horses that we visited with, and some facilities would only allow outside versus things like that. So it really is important when you're looking at what kind of animals to bring into your facility that you consider what your administrators are going to be comfortable with, what they might worry about, or what they might wonder what the DOH is comfortable with, right? Sanitation and those kinds of things. So it's really important to consider that. Lots of rodents live in facilities as resident animals, rabbits, guinea pigs, that kind of thing, as well as birds. When you envision your program, what do you want the animal to do while we're there? What are your behavioral expectations for an animal, right? So, let's see this. One of the things that I learned when I first started exploring animal assisted activities program at my hospital was that people used to be allowed to just bring their pets in. And on the adult forensic inpatient psychiatric unit, one dude got on the floor and was growling at this Great Dane that had never been temperament tested or anything, and the dog growled back. So what is acceptable behavior? As a dog trainer, I think growling's amazing. Growling is telling you, I don't like that. Can you change the situation? Right? I prefer no biting. So what do we accept from animals and allow for them to do to tell us when things are uncomfortable for them? What, if you're doing animal assisted therapy, are there particular activities that you need that dog to do? I'll tell you, most of the activities dogs, the pet therapy dogs that would come into my facility, most of them could sit, and that was all. But they loved everybody, and they're like, hey, what's going on? They're so happy to show up, but they didn't know how to do anything else, right? So if you want to do like physical interactions or interventions with the dog, I did have a dog that she could scent different objects, so we could send her across the room to pick something to work with a speech therapist on the person talking. There were Frisbee dogs. There were dogs that could just stand still and hold stuff in their mouth or pick it up and give it to you and identify different objects. So you want to think about really like, what are you looking for the animal to do when they get there? Do we want them to just show up and be cool and hang out, or do we really need them to do a particular activity? What are we going to require vaccination wise? How many updates do you need? What kind of documentation does your facility need to have in order for the animal to come in? Those are all also very important things to consider. My facility really only cared about rabies and distemper parvo, because those are zoonotic diseases and the infections can spread. Parasitic infections are also a consideration, like certain worms, roundworms, for example. So I chose, as the person leading this flight in my facility, to partner with an organization that did all of that for me. So PAWS required the dogs to have fecal examinations and prove that they were worm-free. They required rabies vaccinations, distemper parvo, and Bordetella, which is a kennel cough vaccine, because we would also have dogs in conjunction with one another. And they managed all of that stuff for me. So I knew when someone was assigned to my facility that I didn't have to run around to get that stuff. And if the Joint Commission showed up tomorrow, I can call pause and someone will either email me or fax that information that's up to date. So that meant annually, I didn't have to go chasing people around to give me their updated rabies information. It was readily available to me from the organization that I was working with, and I didn't have to maintain and manage all of that stuff on my own. You know, as a recreation therapist, you have enough to do. You don't need to do that stuff if someone else is out there and willing to do that work for you. So sometimes, depending on who our infection control nurse was, they would want the rabies on hand. So we would do whatever the facility requested at that time. Again, we talked a little bit about this before, but what kind of supervision is your facility going to require? I think it's important to think about risk management when you're having animals coming into the facility. And although you may have people who come back over and over and get to know your residents and clients and consumers, they don't know what they're walking into. I know working in mental health out of there, I still have a very difficult time getting people to sign up to visit at my facility, because when they hear that we are an inpatient state psychiatric center, they think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and you know, they're terrified to come in, and it can be really scary for people. So what kind of support, not just supervision, but what kind of support do volunteers need to be able to visit at your facility? I have great success in getting people to visit our kids in our outpatient program. I have a much harder time getting people to come in to visit the adult inpatients in my program because of mental health stigma, right? So I not only provide supervision to make sure the visits are safe and that the interactions are going well and that my clients are safe, but also getting something out of the program. I'm also constantly advocating and making sure that the people that are coming to my facility to volunteer have a good experience as well, so that they feel supported and they tell their friends, hey, it's not so bad, come and visit at this place. Most of our volunteers visit on the evenings and weekends because they are of working age and they want something to do with their dog when they're not at work. So we had to make some adjustments as far as our staff scheduling to accommodate visits at times, and it was worth it, right? Like I said, those are the days that I was the most excited to go to work, even though I had to be there later in the evening or coming on the weekend. Me interacting with the dogs was very motivating. We talked a little bit about temperament testing and behavior. But I wanted to make sure I talk a little more in depth about welfare. So humans don't understand dogs. Dogs really do a pretty good job understanding us, I think. But if you think about it, I don't know if you've ever experienced a dog speaking English, but there's one show like Dog with a Dog where the dog talks to the kids. The dogs don't use vocalizations to interact with the species around them. We do, right? Like here I am talking to you for an entire hour to give you a whole bunch of information. You've been listening to people talk for the last 3 days. And although my body language may be kind of important, you know, you're going to tell if I don't want to be here or not, I guess. What the main part of our interactions are verbal. With dogs, it is entirely the opposite. And most humans misunderstand or misread dog body language based on old school thinking and training. For example, we have been taught over time that every dog that shows their belly actually wants us to put our hands on it, right? So, and that if a dog's being naughty, we should roll them over because that's what another dog would do. They would push them into a position where they were on their back, right? That's pretty common knowledge, I would say. But science has changed in the last few years, and we're getting away from punishment-based training. And we're actually understanding now that when dogs interact with one another, the dog that's on the bottom on their back actually has offered that behavior in a sign of de-escalation. Yes, thank you. So the dog offers that behavior. the big bad dog never puts its paws or mouth on the other dog. The other dog rolls onto its back and says, I don't want to fight you. I am totally harmless. Please don't hurt me. And so sometimes that behavior transfers when we are interacting with dogs. And of course, if you have a dog that loves you, they may roll over onto their back. And when they do that for petting, their body language is loose and wiggly, their eyes are squinty, their mouths are open. Sometimes they use their paws to point, like over here or right there. But dogs also roll on their backs when they're terrified, and it is their last ditch effort to stop an interaction because they are so afraid that they could die. It is the last thing they do before they bite very often. So there are a lot of dog bites that occur, as you could imagine, when a dog rolls over halfway or sometimes all the way on their back, but they're very stiff. Their mouths are closed, their eyes are hard, their tail is tucked up under their body, which is harder to see when they're laying down. They usually don't roll all the way over and wiggle like this. It's a very slow, like, oh my gosh, please don't kill me, and they're on their back. But we reach in for their belly anyway. Now they have done everything that they can do to tell us that they don't want us to do that. And we go, well, we're people, so we can touch you whenever we want. Would you ever walk up to someone in the grocery store and just pet them on the face with a pet? Would you? Do you think that you can pet dogs that you see? Yeah, right? Like that's like, oh, it's a dog. I'm going to pet it. So one of the things that is important to me as a dog trainer and an animal advocate, right? I love animals and you all do too. That's why you're here, is to make sure that people understand that dogs should be able to have consent when they're interacting with other beings, period. And if a dog at any time chooses to give a different part of the body to be pet, maybe down near their tail, or they're trying to leave, they are giving you information, right? And I actually like to teach my residents and clients what a consent test is when interacting with a dog, because I don't want them to leave my facility and try to pet a dog and have a bite, which could ruin their relationships with animals for the rest of their life and cause lots of fallout, right? So we're gonna do that now. Ready? So first of all, take your hand, please, and put it over your head. Now pet yourself like you might a dog. And how does that feel? Right? No, dogs, have you ever watched a dog get smacked right on top of the head? I had this one resident that hate the dog so hard. I'm like, good dog, you know, and the dog would blink and nod, right? And I could tell, and now after doing that to myself, that that is really not like a very comfortable thing to do, right? And one of the things that I just asked you, what if you would do, is pet someone on the face that you met. Dogs don't want to have their faces touched for the most part. They don't really like being reached over. We test therapy animals if they can tolerate that stuff. But I will tell you, I have never met a dog that was like, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because it's really uncomfortable for them. Dogs get on top of each other for two reasons. One is to play, and the other is for sex, and that's it, right? And usually they're not trying to play when they're in a therapy session. So what does a consent test look like? When I ask someone if they would like to pet a dog, or if I ask if I can pet their dog, I will pet down the side of the neck, the flank, down the side of their body, or their lower back between their mid-spine and their tail for 3 seconds, and then I will stop. And I will see what the dog does. 1, 2, 3, stop. Sometimes I stop before them because I can see it coming. But what does the dog do? Do they step away? Even a mild shift like away from the person says to me that the dog might not be ready to leave necessarily, but they're done interacting with that being. Do they come back for more? Do they stick their head under the elbow, right? Yeah, I'll have that dog that's like, but you're not done touching me. I said that you shouldn't stop doing that, right? Right. So that is what my dog Gordon used to do to me. And I was like, I'm done petting you. We're going to take you other places so other people can pet you, because I cannot, you know. So some dogs really are insatiable and want that constant like tactile interaction. Some dogs are like, So when I was doing therapy dog evaluations, I would actually fail dogs that could take it, but didn't want it. So I think that that's really important to be mindful of when you're looking at the animals coming into your facility, because when you can accept something but don't enjoy it, how much of that can you accept before you're like, I'm done now? And then when you're done, do you act right? Is it your best self when you're showing up and your bucket is full and you don't have any more room for that? Probably not, right? So that's when we have bad interactions with therapy animals. Another thing, to consider besides their behavior and when we're talking about welfare is like, how often are they getting outside to go to the bathroom? What's the temperature in your facility? I would start visits in assisted living with my dog, and 30 minutes later, he would be panting, not from stress, but because he was so hot, he couldn't take it anymore. And then he needs a drink. And then he needs to pee. Because I'm not going to keep him inside for 2 hours knowing that he just drank an entire bowl of water because he was sweating out of his mouth, because that's what dogs do when they're so hot, right? And if you're not taking your dog out to pee, then they pee in the facility. Everyone has a cow, right? Or your dog is holding it because they're a good boy and that's what they do. But have you ever really had to pee? Right? Like really, really had to go and there wasn't a place to go and you had to hold it for a while. It literally becomes painful to hold your urine, right? So we need to think about those things when we're having animals in our facilities. How many breaks they're getting? Are we watching them doing those consent tests to see if they want to interact with people? Maybe we expect them to play fetch for 30 minutes with a client that we're doing a specific intervention in, and after 10 minutes, the dog won't pick up the ball, and we're like, well, that's not cool. They're giving us information about how they're feeling in the moment, right? So I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now, but please consider, how the pets are doing in the facility and how they're interacting with everyone. So from here, like, what is the plan? So you've decided that you want to do animal assisted therapy and activities. You have chosen a program to work with. You really like Pet Partners, and you found a local chapter that will do some of that work for you so that you get good, sound dogs so that you're prepared to visit with the residents that you are, or clients that you're working with. You've done all of that part. Now you have to go to administration and say, can we have dogs on here? And when I did, they were like, we haven't done that in 15 years since that Great Dane growled at that dude on the floor. And it was horrific, and nobody will ever let us do that again. So I got feedback about what I needed to do to prove that this was an intervention that we wanted to participate in. So after talking to my team members and getting feedback from them, I wanted to make sure that, like, my partner in crime that I share an office with isn't terrified of dogs, right? That didn't go very well. We went to our administration together with a proposal for a policy and the science that backs up why we were asking for some of these particular activities. You want to make sure that you are including that benefits in that policy that you're looking at writing, your plan of action, all of the steps, every single detail. There's no room for error when you work with animals in your risk management policies and procedures. So I make sure that that is covered should something happen to a resident. And it could be something as simple as a skin tear from their own walker while they were reaching to the dog. It might not have anything to do with the dog at all, right? And then what's it going to look like when we implement that activity? So guess what, guys? This is a really popular topic. There are 1,510,000 results that Google Scholar found in 14 seconds related to research regarding animal-assisted therapy and activities. I just looked up an hour ago to see if it was new, and it's the same. That's the number I got. So you can look at age or date ranges, right, since 2018, since 2021. Pick something that's relevant with the population that you're working with, and look at those studies and see what they have to say. And then find some specifically related to recreation therapy. There aren't quite as many. There are 39,400 results, and it took Google Scholar 3 more seconds to find all those. But the studies are out there to prove not only how effective animal-assisted therapy and activities are, and I'm not sure about resident dog programs. That's not stuff like research that I've actually looked into myself. Like, it's out there. The backing for your program actually exists, and you don't necessarily have to make it up, right? Like, I know, Jason, you're doing some research right now, and it's a lot of work, and it's very time consuming, and you need a long length of time from the beginning to the end to see the real results. Other people have done that for you already with recreation therapy. Now you could try to replicate some of these studies within your organization to give that feedback to your administrators later on, right? But some of it's been done already, so it's not like reinventing the wheel. So regarding your policy, do you have anything at your facility related to animals already? Look everywhere. Look in your infection control manual, see if there's stuff in there. Look in any like different branch of the facility, like what do they require? Does anything exist already? For me, nothing was out there, so I actually looked outside of my facility to find other policies and procedures to give me feedback about how to write mine at the time. So you're gonna do that research, you're gonna call people too, you're not just gonna like look online, you're gonna actually pick up the phone and call all the other people that you met at this conference and say, who has what, right? Who has a resident dog? I'm really interested in that. Who has birds in their facility? How do you take care of them? Whose job is it? You know, is it Rex's job? Usually, a lot of the time it is, right? I hope that's cool with you if you like birds, right? If you don't, you need to find someplace else to work. You know, see what's out there, see what other people are doing, get feedback from them about what is working in your area or other areas and what is not. And then you want to make sure when you begin to write your policy that you start to have communication with other people at the facility. Our infection control nurse was my biggest ally. Luckily, they also loved animals, so it wasn't hard to get them on board. But that was the first hurdle for me. All of our administrators were like, is this going to even be safe enough for you to do because of infection control issues? So bringing that person on board was really important. I also got our environmental services, our housekeepers on board, because there's going to be spills sometimes. There could be pee, there could be other things. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for the worst, because if you prepare for the worst, you usually don't have to experience that, right? So make sure you have a spill kit on hand when you're having visits in case somebody does something. And I say somebody because it's not always the animal that has the issue, right? It could be the clients that you're serving. So make sure you're prepared for what those visits look like, as well as like fur management, especially if it is a warm facility that you work in. Talk to your risk managers. What are their concerns? What do they need to know? Make sure you put all of that stuff into your policy. I'm going to show you some examples in a few minutes. And then, of course, because we're going to follow APIDE, we want to talk to our quality management department and see what are their expectations. Do they want outcomes from this program reported in any overall hospital reports or anything like that? Are there other departments that you're going to engage? Once I started having animal-assisted therapy and activities, or excuse me, animal-assisted activities come into my facility, the therapists were like, can I have a dog sit in on my session with so-and-so? I just saw a completely different person than I've been seeing for the last 2 months. I don't know who that patient is anymore when the dog is here. Can we arrange more therapeutic intervention with that particular animal, you know? So who am I going to start interacting with? And sometimes it was just having them come with me. And also, again, right, dogs improve, or cats or whatever, they improve our motivation to participate, our motivation, and that's true for other team members as well. So we would actually have doctors, everybody showed up on the unit. It was like the whole team was there, which is really wonderful. So asking them, like, what would their expectations be from a program so we can plan ahead for some of those things. So here is a screenshot of my policy, and I update it every year, so it's refreshed all the time. We always look at things and make sure we need to make any adjustments or changes. So the first part of my policy is a policy statement which speaks a little bit to the benefits of animal-assisted therapy in a very brief way. I'm not going to go on a dissertation type paper about how great this this stuff is, but I do want to state why we're doing it. Then any related or relevant policies should be included. So the one policy that we needed to make sure we were following when we implemented this kind of program is our intake for any volunteers who are coming into the facility. Oh my gosh, that went by quick. All right, so we want to look at onboarding those people so they get the training so that they're safe. We want to look at how we plan and staff for that. We included definitions, that's pretty important. What does each thing mean? So when someone asks me a question, I can refer back to the policy and say that is included here. And then we went through the list of responsibilities for each party, mainly focusing on the therapist providing the intervention or supervising the intervention, and then the certifying organization. So in my case, remember I said that they maintained all of our veterinary records and made sure that the dogs were sound enough to come to our facility. There's actually an extra level of certification for dogs that came into hospitals versus long-term care facilities. And then the responsibility of the handler, should the dog go to the bathroom, their duty always when handling their dog in a facility was only to attend to their dog. So no employees were allowed to volunteer with their dog while they were at work because it's a conflict of interest. You cannot work and supervise your dog at the same time. And their real job is to monitor their dogs while they were there and not necessarily, of course you socialize with the residents and you watch your environment, but making sure that you are monitoring your dog's welfare while you're there. And then who else does what, and then how it's going to be carried out. That implementation piece is really important. And then you're going to review your policy with outside party. So my suggestion is to find somebody who doesn't work with you and have them read your policy and tell you if they have any questions, what do they understand, what do they not understand, what order do things happen in. Really just use the people outside of your work environment to give you feedback to make sure that your policy could be picked up by any person and understood and followed. All right, this is a cool part with the dogs. So these are my volunteers. We haven't had visits during COVID. We're hoping to get some of the volunteers since then, but that's Cash, the bull mastiff. I like to tell his story. He was a Craigslist dog, and his owner found him as an adult dog. He was 3, and he was perfect for therapy work. He just like fell right into it, like he'd been doing it his whole life, but really he was doing it well. Duke, the bulldog, he was a little bruiser, full of energy, and was a wet dog from that leader who we had from a puppy. Poppy, this guy here was this tall and always came to visit with lots of towels because he was a very drooly dude. I visited his mom's house a couple times and there was like spitting on the ceiling. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to own a Saint Bernard. This is Lumpy. Lumpy, actually, you can see on his vest, he had his therapy dog certificate, or his AKC title for therapy dog work. Lumpy visited my program, he visited the hospital, and he met his 8 hours or else every month. He was a pretty active guy. And then Blizzard was one of the dogs that visited with us and could do some tricks. So as I said before, it's really important to follow the API process, right? You're going to make sure that you are assessing what's working, you're going to, or what your plan is, right? You're going to plan, then you're going to implement your intervention and see how it goes, but make sure you do evaluations. Do evaluations with your consumers. Did they like it? Were they afraid of the giant dog and would prefer the little lumpy dog to visit? You know, you're going to do ongoing evaluation, not just of the program, but of your residents' participation in the program. And then make sure that your documentation is aligned. Documentation is risk management. If you wrote it down when something happened and you wrote it down clearly, the events surrounding the thing, you will cover yourself should anything happen in the future. should anybody have any questions, you can go back to that documentation. I always tell my staff at Hutchins, like, if it's not written down, it doesn't happen. One day last week, a nurse said somebody was sexually inappropriate with someone else in our report, or verbal report in the morning meeting, and I said, what does that mean? And I looked in the notes and there's literally nothing there. So I'm like, apparently it didn't happen. Now I need to go chase down who said that the first time and get them to write something down. So it is very, very, very. Right. So you want to be behaviorally specific when you're talking about anything in your documentation. And finally, that's my guy, it's my therapy dog, Morgan. As I said, my current dog already wears that yellow bandana that says, don't nothing touch me, because he is not into therapy dog work at all. He has 6 friends and that's enough. But Gordon, on the other hand, he was a really special guy who kind of led me into this world and got me to where I am. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And my email is up here. My dog training website is up here. If you want to Google me, check it out. So I'm happy to hang out and talk.